By all accounts, 2014 was supposed to be, and frankly should have been, a transitional lost season for the Carolina Panthers organization due to salary cap constraints after 2013. The thought was going to be they were going to lose a lot of pieces off of their divisional championship team from the previous season, and that's exactly what happened. You know, among others, you've got Jordan Gross retiring, you've got Terrell Wharton retiring, you've got the top three options for Cam Newton from the previous year all leaving, whether that's Ted Ginn, your third option, Brandon LaFell, your second option, or your top option, Steve Smith Sr., arguably the greatest player in the history of the organization. You're talking about other key losses like on defense, so on and so forth. Just, it was going to be a transitional year. It was supposed to be a bad year. It was supposed to be one of those years where you just kind of tread water and you get ready for 2015. And then you throw in the suspension, the exempt listing of Greg Hardy for pretty much all of 2014, your best pass rusher, your best defensive lineman. And, who could blame anybody for thinking that the Carolina Panthers were going to have a lost year in 2014, especially when you look at the fact that they started off 3-8-1. They were bad. They were very bad. Fortunately for the Carolina Panthers, the organization, the team, the players, the coaches, the fan base, they were playing in the NFC South, which was historically brutally bad. And as a result, the Carolina Panthers found themselves in December, even at 3-8-1, right in the thick of the playoff race. And the Carolina Panthers went about salvaging their season, saving their season, and making it still a productive and positive season. They won their last 4 games in the regular season to go 7-8-1, including that Week 17 thrashing of the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta. They win the NFC South, the first team in the history of that division to win the division in back-to-back years. And then they go to the playoffs. Yes, they beat Ryan Lindley and the Arizona Cardinals, which might not be saying much, but they still got a victory in the playoffs, and that's saying something. Once you get there, those teams are there for a reason, and the Panthers beat a playoff team that had won 11 games during the season, regardless of what you want to do to try and minimize it. And then they went to Seattle in the divisional round and put up a game fight against the defending Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks, who came that close to being 2-time defending Super Bowl champions. So what was supposed to be a lost transitional season ended up being, at the end of the day, a huge positive for the Carolina Panthers, a real building block for the Carolina Panthers, now looking forward to 2015 as a season where they could potentially contend, not just in the NFC South, mind you, but in the entire NFC as a whole. And part of the reason for this is coming to the NFL draft. One of the things the Pittsburgh Steelers used to do well for so many years was they hit on their first-round picks. Sometimes I don't always agree with their philosophy. Sometimes they miss throughout the rest of the draft. As it's going to happen. You can't be perfect all the time. You can't be great all the time. Sometimes you can't even be good all the time in the draft. It's such a crapshoot. But the Pittsburgh Steelers, year in and year out, consistently hit on their first-round picks. And that makes a big difference. That makes a huge difference from an organizational standpoint. Because those marquee picks, those highest value picks, you're cashing in on consistently. That's something that the Carolina Panthers have done, frankly, throughout their history since the early 2000s. I mean, you can go way, way back to the days of Julius Peppers and then Jordan Gross and so on and so on and so forth. By and large, the Carolina Panthers hit on the majority of their first-round picks over the past 12, 13 years. And when you look at their recent history, you look at the last 4 years, they've hit big time on each of their first-round picks. 2011, they've got the number 1 overall pick. They take Cam Newton. You've got your young franchise quarterback whose best football is still ahead of him. 2012, at pick number 9, you sit there and you take a guy like Luke Kuechly, who has become the leader of your defense, one of the best linebackers, regardless of position of linebacking in all of the National Football League, a former Defensive Player of the Year. In 2013, you've got Star Lotulelei falls to you at pick number 14, and he's become a cornerstone of the interior of that Carolina Panthers defense. And then you look at 2014, their first-round pick, Kelvin Benjamin. While he had his mental lapses and made his mistakes in 2014, he also showed himself to be a legit number 1 wide receiver at the NFL level, a rookie with over 1,000 yards receiving. Mind you, at a position that for so many years was viewed as a position that it would be a rough adjustment for top-flight prospects to adjust to the game and why there was such a high bust ratio. Well, Kelvin Benjamin most certainly didn't fit into that mold. So you can look at the Carolina Panthers' recent history and you say, well, when you get guys like Cam and Kuechly and Lotulelei and Kelvin Benjamin out of the last 4 first rounds, it's not hard to see why this team could win back-to-back division titles. But they've also had some misses too, and frankly, you know, they haven't really done well outside of the first round. Now, 2014, their entire class, for the most part, looks like one big hit. Ben Wakiri and Trey Boston and so on and so forth. That was a really good draft class. Gettleman did a great job with that 2014 draft, which has this team looking much better off for 2015, 2016, and beyond. But a lot of their other draft classes, they didn't. It wasn't just for the first round pick, they'd be looking a whole lot worse because they had so many misses over the years, in particular in the middle portions of the draft. And even when you look at misses in terms of 2010, they didn't have a first round pick because they had traded it away the previous year to move into the second round to get Everett Brown. So not only did they bust badly on Everett Brown, but they gave up a first-round pick the next year for a second-round pick in that year's draft. You don't ever fucking do that. That is dumb dick. That is stupid. And that's why that John Fox era ended as badly as it did after the 2010 season. It should have. Just no reason for that. But like I said, when you look at the Carolina Panthers in their draft history, by and large, they've hit on most of the marquee picks, but a lot of the other stuff has been missing and been lacking, and that's a part of the reason why I feel like they had gotten themselves into some salary cap trouble in recent years, because they had to overpay to bring guys in. They had to overpay to keep guys because the talent reservoir, the depth, that kind of bench strength wasn't all that great. Now, heading into this offseason, I didn't expect the Carolina Panthers to be big-time players because they still wanted to make sure they managed to their salary cap situation. They have to prepare for big deals like Cam Newton and Luke Kuechly down the road, so on and so forth. So they went about what they needed to go about doing. They brought in veteran players, guys like Michael Orr, guys like Peanut Tillman that have been successful pros, that have been a part of successful organizations in the past. They bring back somebody like Ted Ginn to be another option for Cam Newton in the passing game. They take Jared Boykin away from the Green Bay Packers, a guy who really didn't do much in 2014, in part maybe because he was buried on the depth chart behind Cobb, Nelson, and Devontae Adams at wide receiver. So the Panthers didn't go hog wild in free agency, but the smartest thing they probably did is they didn't re-sign Byron Bell. They didn't invest big money in a terrible left tackle. And I can't tell you how wise that was for the Carolina Panthers to do. Now, heading into this 2015 draft, Carolina Panthers fans have to be excited about the possibilities because they saw what Gettleman, the general manager, did in 2014 with that really, really solid draft class from pretty much top to bottom, something that a lot of Carolina Panthers fans haven't seen with many Panthers drafts going back for a decade or more. So now what does this team need to do in 2015 to produce the same type of results? What do they need to do to address some of the biggest holes and problem areas that they have to be able to take that next step and become a contender in the NFC in 2015? Well, in terms of their needs, I think they're mostly on the offensive side of the ball. At the end of the day, Cam Newton is your guy, and he's the guy that you have to build around. Cam Newton is going to be the guy that you ride or die with, and that's just all there is to it. Now on defense, they have needs. Obviously, Greg Hardy is gone. Coney Ealy, your second-round pick from last year, might be something, but he didn't really show much last year, frankly. You could use some depth at the edge rush position, especially on that defensive line. You could use a complimentary weak side linebacker to go along with guys like Thomas Davis and Luke Kuechly. You could use another explosive, dynamic linebacker on the outside. But at the end of the day, it's really about the offense. First and foremost, they have to do a better job of protecting Cam Newton. They must upgrade that offensive line, in particular at left tackle. Frankly, they could use a right tackle as well. I would not be surprised to see Carolina double dip on the offensive line at the tackle position with the first 3 rounds of the 2015 NFL Draft. That doesn't necessarily mean that they would do it in rounds 1 and 2. That doesn't necessarily mean that they'll do it in rounds 1 and 3. It could be rounds 2 and 3, or it could be rounds 2 and 4. But I'd be very surprised and stunned if they didn't address the offensive line, in particular, again, the tackle position, early and often in this 2015 NFL Draft. I still think they need a better number 2 option opposite of Kelvin Benjamin. Now, that could come via the first round. It's another good wide receiver class. It could come in the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th round because, again, this is a good wide receiver class, so there are productive players to be had throughout the first 2 days and even into day 3 at that position. But I also look at running back as being a huge need. D'Angelo Williams, gone. Jonathan Stewart, had, I would argue, maybe his best season as a Carolina Panther going back to his rookie year in 2008. But the problem is with Jonathan Stewart, as it always is, you'll get those flashes, you'll get those brief hints and whiffs of production, But then he's injured here and he's injured there. And the bottom line is he's still carrying a huge cap figure. How much longer are you going to want to keep Jonathan Stewart around? On top of the fact that you don't really have a dynamic option behind him. At least for years, you had that platoon of D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart. Well, maybe it's time now for the Carolina Panthers to seriously consider investing an early pick into a running back that could be there to spell Jonathan Stewart, to complement Jonathan Stewart, and then also, when the inevitable Jonathan Stewart injury comes, replace Jonathan Stewart, step in for Jonathan Stewart, and then long-term be that reliable option out of the backfield for Cam Newton in that Carolina Panthers offense. And the good thing, again, for the Carolina Panthers is that running back is a really good class this year. And when you look at it, offensive tackle, probably for the first 2 to 3 rounds, is a pretty good class. Running back, wide receiver, going through the first 4 rounds. And I'd argue with the running back, you can go even deep at all the way to the 7th round, the undrafted free agent ranks. This is a good class. Wide receiver, good class again. Where the Carolina Panthers have their biggest needs are some of the strongest areas of this 2015 NFL Draft. So the philosophy for me for the Carolina Panthers with Dave Gettleman is very simple. You've got to take the best player available at a position of need. That's what they did in 2011 with Cam Newton. That's what they did in 2012 with Luke Kuechly. They said, fuck everybody else. We're taking this guy at top 10. He fills a big position in need. 2013, they had Star Lotulelei fall into their lap, and he happened to meet a big-time need. 2014, Kelvin Benjamin fell into their lap, and again, he met a big-time need. If the Carolina Panthers can go through the first 3 to 4 rounds of the 2015 NFL Draft with that type of philosophy, they can find a couple of instant, immediate impact players for that offense in particular that so badly needs it, that could help Carolina get over the hump. And again, not only I think ensure them of winning the NFC South for a 3rd straight season, which again is something that has never happened, but make them potentially real deal contenders in all of the NFC.